Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we are going to be tackling something really interesting.
Yeah.
Clean energy stock prices.
Yeah. A
Uh,
lot of people are interested in this.
exactly. And to help us unpack all this, we've got some really cool research that
hmm
uses some pretty advanced machine learning techniques
Yeah, it's really cutting edge stuff.
to predict which way prices are going to move,
Or down.
up or down. Exactly.
Oh, big question.
The million-dollar question, right? And the source for this deep dive is an academic paper from the Journal of Climate Finance.
Oh, very reputable.
It is, the title is Using Machine Learning to Predict Clean Energy Stock Prices. How important are market volatility and economic policy uncertainty?
It's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, but the insights are worth it.
Definitely.
You might be surprised at what the researchers found.
Yeah.
But before we get into all the really interesting nitty-gritty,
Yeah.
I think it's worth taking a step back
Oh, okay.
and just acknowledging how much the clean energy sector has grown.
It's exploded.
Global investment in clean energy hit a record $755 billion in 2021.
Wow.
That's a 20% compound annual growth rate since 2004.
That's huge.
It is huge.
And it's not slowing down.
Not at all.
In fact, the research suggests that by 2024, investment in electrified transport,
Think electric vehicles.
yes, all the infrastructure that supports EVs
Exactly.
is on track to overtake renewable energy investment.
Which is really interesting when you think about it.
It is super interesting, and it makes understanding these stocks even more critical.
For sure.
So we know clean energy is a hot market,
Yeah.
but what we don't know as well is how to predict where prices are headed next.
That's the challenge.
That is the challenge. That's what this research is trying to address, and it's using machine learning to do it,
Right.
which is super fascinating. So how would you explain machine learning to someone who's like, okay, I've heard that term, but I don't really know what it means?
So basically, it's like training a computer to spot patterns in massive amounts of data.
And then make predictions based on what it learns.
So instead of relying on gut feelings or hunches,
Yeah, intuition,
exactly,
This paper uses machine learning
to try to find
to try to find the real drivers
as real drivers.
behind clean energy stock price movements.
Because we all want to know what those are.
Right, and some of the findings
Yeah.
really challenge conventional wisdom.
Do tell.
Like one of our most surprising discoveries was the importance of traditional technical indicators.
Wait, really?
Yeah,
Like
like the 50-day and 200-day moving averages,
no.
which track stock price trends over time.
I wouldn't have guessed they'd be so relevant for something as cutting edge as clean energy.
Right.
Like those are pretty old school investing tools.
Yeah, you think it would be all about,
The latest.
the latest algorithms.
Yeah.
The fancy AI stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
But it seems even in a fast-moving sector, like this historical price patterns can still offer valuable insights.
So for anyone listening who might be new to investing, what exactly are moving averages?
Okay, so moving averages are simply lines on a chart
Okay.
that show the average price of a stock
Okay.
over a certain period.
Great.
And they help smooth out the day-to-day fluctuations and
Right.
highlight the overall trend.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got these classic technical indicators
Yeah.
playing a big role.
Yeah.
What else did the researchers find?
Well, they also looked at market volatility,
Okay.
which is essentially a measure of how much stock prices are bouncing around.
Got it.
And they focused on two specific indicators of volatility.
Okay.
The VIX,
Okay.
often called the fear gauge because it reflects uncertainty in the stock market,
Right.
and the OVX,
Okay.
which tracks the volatility of oil prices.
So if the VIX is spiking,
Yeah.
meaning investors are getting nervous,
Yeah.
could that be a sign that clean energy stocks might be in for a wild ride?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Though it's not always that straightforward.
Right.
Sometimes that volatility can actually be a positive thing for clean energy. Let's say oil prices are fluctuating wildly, like we saw in early 2020.
Yeah.
That can create more urgency
Right.
around the need for alternative energy sources.
So in that case, volatility might actually make clean energy stocks more attractive.
Exactly.
Okay.
It really depends on the specific circumstances.
Of course.
And importantly,
Yeah.
your own tolerance for risk.
Right. Some people can handle those big swings
Absolutely.
more than others.
And some people see opportunity in that volatility.
Exactly. All right. So we've got technical indicators.
Mm-hmm.
We've got market volatility.
Mm-hmm.
What other factors influence clean energy stocks?
Well, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, I like
And
this.
they also looked at technology stock market volatility, figuring it would be a major factor.
Yeah, that makes sense. You'd think what happens in the tech world
Right.
would have a big impact on clean energy.
Because they're so intertwined.
Exactly.
But surprisingly,
Yeah.
they found it wasn't that influential.
Wow. That is unexpected.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, one possible explanation
Okay.
is that the cost of clean energy technologies, like solar and wind, has dropped dramatically.
Oh, yeah. They're much more affordable.
They're now often cheaper than fossil fuels,
Wow.
even without needing the latest cutting-edge advancements.
So they don't need those breakthroughs
Right.
to drive down prices.
So clean energy may be less dependent on those constant tech breakthroughs than we often assume.
Though I imagine that doesn't mean individual companies
Oh, of course not.
pushing those boundaries
Yeah.
aren't still impacted by
Oh, absolutely.
tech advancements.
Absolutely. There are companies out there really pushing the envelope.
Okay, so that's something to keep in mind.
Definitely.
But for the overall sector,
Yeah.
it's not as big a deal.
Right.
Okay, so we've got technical indicators, we've got market volatility, we've got tech volatility. Now what about?
Well, we can't forget about
Yeah.
economic policy uncertainty.
Yes, of course. Government policies and incentives play a huge role
A huge role.
in shaping the clean energy landscape.
Absolutely.
So how do they measure that in this paper?
Well, they use something called the EPU index
Okay.
to track things like changes in regulations or tax policies
Mm-hmm.
that might impact clean energy companies.
And what did they find?
Well, what's interesting is that while this uncertainty wasn't always a dominant factor,
Okay.
it did play a significant role in predicting price movements for a specific clean energy ETF.
Okay, now for anyone who might not be familiar,
Right.
what's an ETF?
An ETF, or exchange-traded fund, is basically a basket of stocks
Okay.
that you can buy or sell on the stock market, just like a single stock.
Got it.
So it's a way to diversify your investments.
And the specific ETF they looked at was?
The QCLN.
Okay, and what's special about that one?
Well, the QCLN focuses specifically on U.S. companies.
Ah, okay, so it's more sensitive to...
Any policy shifts happening here in the U.S.
Okay, so even though economic policy uncertainty
Yeah.
doesn't always rock the boat for the entire sector,
Right. It's something to keep an eye on.
especially if you're interested in companies operating in specific countries or regions,
That makes sense because a major policy change.
could be great news for some companies
Yeah.
and spell trouble for others.
Exactly. So we've learned a lot already.
We have.
Technical indicators are surprisingly relevant.
It's true.
Market volatility can be both a friend and a foe.
Definitely.
Tech volatility isn't as influential as we might think.
A little bit surprising.
But economic policy uncertainty can play a big role.
A big role.
So what does it all mean for you,
Right.
the potential clean energy investor?
That's the big question, and one we'll tackle right after a quick break. All right, we're back and ready to apply what we've learned about clean energy stock prices.
Yeah, to put it all into practice.
Exactly, and I think what I'm taking away from this research
Yeah.
is that it's not just about, chasing the latest hype,
The hype.
right? There are some,
Fundamental.
like fundamental factors at work here.
Right? Those technical indicators, market volatility, economic policy uncertainty,
Mm-hmm.
all these things can give us a much better understanding of why these stocks move the way they do.
So let's get practical.
Okay.
If you're listening to this thinking, okay, maybe I should look into clean energy investing,
Yeah.
what are the key takeaways?
What can you actually use?
Yeah, what can you actually use?
So first and foremost, and this might surprise you,
Right.
don't underestimate the power of technical analysis.
Really?
Remember how we talked about those classic technical indicators?
Yeah.
Moving averages
Mm-hmm.
being strong predictors?
Yeah, I was surprised by that.
Yeah. Well, if we connect that back to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
it reinforces the importance of studying historical price patterns and trends.
Right.
They can give you valuable insights into potential future movements, even in a cutting-edge sector like clean energy.
So even though it feels very future-focused,
Right.
clean energy is still subject to the timeless market forces.
Of supply and demand.
Yeah, which we can see reflected in those price charts.
Exactly. Now, let's not forget about market volatility.
Right.
Specifically, those indicators we discussed, the VIX and the OVX. The research suggests that keeping a close eye on these measures can help you anticipate potential swings in clean energy stock prices.
So if I'm looking at the VIX
Yeah.
and it's suddenly spiking,
Investors are getting nervous.
yeah, is that a sign that maybe I should hold off on any new clean energy investments?
It could be.
Okay.
A spiking VIX generally means there's a lot of fear and uncertainty in the market,
Right.
and that can make investors skittish.
Yeah, makes sense.
However,
Okay.
if you're a more risk-tolerant investor,
Mm-hmm.
you might see that same spike in volatility as a buying opportunity.
Because if there's a dip in prices
Exactly.
during all that market turmoil,
You could buy in at a lower price,
yeah,
potentially leading to bigger gains down the road.
high risk, high reward.
Exactly. It all comes back to your personal risk tolerance
Mhm.
and investment goals.
Right.
There's no one-size-fits-all answer.
That's a good reminder. Okay, so far we've got technical indicators. We've got market volatility.
Yeah.
Now, what about the volatility within specific sectors?
Okay.
What about technology, for example?
That's a great question. We talked earlier about how, surprisingly, the volatility of technology stocks wasn't a major factor in predicting overall clean energy stock prices.
Yeah, I found that really interesting.
While that finding is true for the broader sector, it's
Mhm.
still worth paying attention to individual companies that rely heavily on new technology. For example, a company developing a next-generation battery
Okay.
or a breakthrough solar panel technology. Their stock price might be more sensitive to what's happening in the tech sector as a whole.
So even if tech volatility isn't a huge factor for the overall clean energy market,
Right.
it could still be relevant for specific companies.
Exactly. You really have to look at the individual company
Hmm.
and understand how exposed they are
To technological advancements.
to those advancements.
That makes a lot of sense. So for our listeners who are new to investing,
Yeah.
is there a particular resource they could use
Hmm.
to kind of assess a company's exposure?
Exposure to technological risk.
Yeah.
There are a lot of great resources out there.
Okay.
One that comes to mind is a company's 10K report.
What is that?
It's a comprehensive annual report
Okay.
that publicly traded companies are required to file with the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Where can you find a 10K report?
You can usually find them on the company's investor relations website
Okay.
or on the SEC's website.
Got it.
One of the best parts about 10K reports is that they go into detail about the company's business model, the risks they face, and their financial performance.
Mm-hmm.
You can also find information about their research and development activities,
Oh, okay.
which will give you a good sense of their reliance on new technology.
Okay, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the last factor we discussed from the paper.
Economic policy uncertainty. Right. You
Mhm.
want to pay attention to the EPU index, which tracks things like changes in government regulations or tax policies that could impact clean energy companies.
Can you give an example of a specific policy change
Yeah.
that could influence stock prices?
Let's say there's talk of a new tax credit
Okay.
for electric vehicle purchases.
Okay.
That could cause a surge in demand for EVs,
Right.
which would benefit companies that manufacture EVs or their components.
Makes sense.
On the other hand, if a government decides to reduce subsidies for solar panel installations, that could negatively impact companies in that part of the clean energy industry.
So it's really a mixed bag.
It can be.
It depends on the specific policy
Exactly.
and how it impacts different companies.
And the EPU index helps investors gauge the level of uncertainty
Right.
surrounding those policies.
Okay, so it's a valuable tool for understanding the potential risks and rewards
Absolutely.
of investing in this sector. This has been a great discussion,
Yeah.
and I feel like I'm getting a much clearer picture of the factors that influence clean energy stock prices.
It's fascinating to see how these different forces interact.
It is. Before we wrap up, I want to make sure we circle back to something you mentioned earlier.
Okay.
The importance of individual investors understanding their own risk tolerance.
Yes, that's crucial. Clean energy, like any investment, carries risks.
Of course.
And it's essential to assess your own comfort level
Right.
with those risks before making any decisions,
Absolutely. If you're someone who panics at the slightest market dip,
right?
then clean energy might not be the right fit for you.
It might not be.
But if you're comfortable with a bit more volatility
Yeah.
and have a longer-term investment horizon,
Then this sector could offer some exciting opportunities.
I agree. Remember, investing is a marathon, not a sprint.
Well said.
And on that note, we'll sign off until next time. Keep diving deep, fellow knowledge seekers. All right, we're back for our final stretch of our clean energy deep dive.
Yeah.
And ready to talk about the future of this exciting sector.
It's been quite a journey.
It has.
We've explored the surprising relevance of those traditional technical indicators, the double-edged sword of market volatility,
Right.
and the nuances of tech and policy influences.
We've covered a lot of ground,
Mm-hmm.
but what does it all mean for those of us who are
Mhm.
intrigued by the potential of clean energy investing,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe a little hesitant to jump in.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway
Yeah.
is that knowledge is power.
Hmm.
This research arms you with a deeper understanding of the forces shaping this dynamic market.
Right.
And with that understanding,
Yeah.
you can make more informed decisions.
Whether you're
Yeah, whether you're diversifying your portfolio, timing your investments, or just feeling more confident about where to put your money.
So it's not about trying to predict the future perfectly.
No, not at all.
It's about recognizing that clean energy investing, like any form of investing, carries both risks and rewards.
Absolutely.
And by understanding the factors that drive those risks and rewards, you can make smarter choices. Hopefully. But with all this talk of volatility and risk,
Yeah.
how can investors feel confident?
That's the big question.
Yeah, about the long-term prospects of clean energy.
Well, I think it's important to remember that the clean energy transition is a long-term trend.
Okay.
It's not a fad or a fleeting moment in the market.
Right, it's driven by some pretty fundamental forces.
Yeah, things like climate change, resource scarcity, and technological innovation.
So even though there will be ups and downs along the way,
They're all
the overall direction is clear.
the trend is clear.
And that long-term perspective
Yeah.
is crucial for investors.
If you're constantly reacting to short-term market fluctuations, you're likely to miss out on the bigger picture.
That makes sense. It's about having the conviction to stay the course.
Yeah.
Even when things get a little bumpy.
Absolutely. Now, let's zoom out a bit
Okay.
and consider what these findings mean for the clean energy transition as a whole.
Okay.
The fact that investor sentiment and market dynamics play such a significant role in clean energy stock prices
Yeah.
underscores just how important investor confidence is.
Right.
If we want to see a rapid and successful shift to a more sustainable future,
Yeah.
we need to create a stable and predictable investment environment that attracts capital to this sector.
So it's not just about developing innovative technologies.
No.
Or enacting supportive policies.
It's also about fostering a sense of trust
Yeah.
and stability in the clean energy market.
That makes a lot of sense.
Policymakers need to communicate clearly.
Hmm.
Companies need to be transparent.
And investors
Yeah.
need to adopt that long-term perspective.
The real value of clean energy lies in its potential to create a more sustainable and resilient future.
Right. And that requires...
Yeah, it requires patience, persistence, and a willingness to ride out the inevitable ups and downs.
Well said, the future of clean energy is bright.
It is.
But it's not going to unfold in a straight line.
It never does.
There will be challenges, setbacks, and periods of uncertainty.
That's part of the journey.
But for those who believe in the transformative power of this sector
Mm-hmm.
and are willing to stay committed,
The rewards could be immense.
well, that brings us to the end of our clean energy deep dive for today.
Yeah.
But we hope you'll continue to explore this fascinating and ever-evolving sector.
There's always more to learn, and as we've seen, that knowledge can empower you to make a real difference.
And on that note, we'll sign off until next time. Keep diving deep, fellow knowledge seekers.